today in this really important conversation. Did you all get a chance to go through the beautiful art gallery? It's extraordinary. All love it. We have any of our artists in the room. They've been in and out this week. So if you're in the room, thank you for the beautiful art you presented to all of us. I want to welcome you to this event, Free to Be Me, Freedom in Identity. We have an incredible panel this afternoon. And to open us and to begin, we want to begin with art. So I want to bring up to the stage before we begin our panel two incredible young poets from Get Lit Words Ignite. Please welcome Cyrus Roberts and Alex Rafaloff.
There's a girl burning inside my head. I was force-fed femininity, and when I couldn't swallow, named it famine, named it fire. The fire of who I was supposed to be, driven by a god-awful wind. God did not name us Adam or Eve.
You are not God. You cannot give.
Men,
we treat love like a weapon. We ignore what we need and we take what we want. You can't just change your hair and escape woman. You have no power.
Being a man is taking power. You can never be just man when you got to put trans above your name. You are a synthetic, inauthentic representation of your insecurity. How can you call yourself a man if you don't walk like one or talk like one or rip yourself apart like one?
Or ignore the needs of your heart like one. Being a man is breaking love, and loving struggle is hating love but loving hustle. You are not a man until you've broken yourself and put it back together with the shattered hearts of others. Or just go to therapy, Cyrus. I mean, Milana, your name is Milana.
You gotta sell your soul. You gotta kill Milana. If you don't start the fire, you're gonna watch yourself burn. Are you ready to murder?
Watch yourself burn. Take the world from behind. Call it screens, music, and scratch marks, poetry. Call yourself what your goddamn body shows. Your name is not Alex. Come face to face with death, Cyrus, and piss on the shroud.
Tell your brothers to pillage and sisters to hide.
Tell Satan that you're waiting for his offer and take everything. Men don't feel.
Men broken hearts with steel.
Men don't steal lips from other men and women, Cyrus.
Men ain't bi, Cyrus.
Well, men ain't trans, Milana. Men play with emotion like a toy, Cyrus.
Men make deals with the devil.
Men don't take pills to get their head level. Men don't have mental illnesses.
Men ain't broken
like you, Milana.
I mean,
Alex. I mean, Cyrus.
Who told
you could be a man? You are burning.
No matter how many pills you swallow, God will not creep down into your soul and follow. So stop trying to trick yourself into masculinity. You're too broken to be a man. You're just a poet.
You are burning. Boys don't cry, Cyrus. Just die, Milana.
Look at me, Cyrus.
Don't look at me, Milana. I'm a man, Cyrus. I can take Milana. Show no emotion, Cyrus. Your heart is an OC, Milana. You cannot expose it, Milana.
Believe me, I've tried, Milana.
You were not chosen, Cyrus. You are burning, Milana. You're never going to be a real man, and you don't need to be. Be whatever man is man most to you.
Take it from one who knows. You're much too good for that.
You are
Cyrus.
You are Alex. And I swear
that's man enough.
Give it up for the Get Lit Poets. I don't think they heard you the first time because that was extraordinary. Give it up for the Get Lit Poets. Thank you, Cyrus. Thank you, Alex, for blessing this space with that beautiful words and your energy. Thank you. We're going to begin this next conversation. It's an important one. And if you're ready for this conversation, let me hear you say, yeah. If you're ready, let me hear you say, yeah. We have the most incredible panel today. I'm so excited. And I want to begin. They're going to come to the side of the stage and begin to come up here with us. And to host our conversation today, we have Nigel Porter, who is a partner at the Soze Agency, which is a creative agency dedicated to social impact. He is an advocate for the LGBTQIA social justice community and a curator of impactful content, safe spaces, and all things unique. We're truly honored to have Nigel host today's conversation. Nigel will introduce the rest of this extraordinary panel to you so that we can get right into this conversation. So will you please put your hands together and welcome this incredible panel to the stage? Let me hear you.
How's everybody doing today? Good, awesome. As the panel comes out, I just have to give one more round of applause for Get Lit. Give one more round of applause for Get Lit. So really, really grateful to be here tonight, particularly as we're talking about mental health in relation to the LGBTQ community. And so I would like to have the panelists introduce themselves. I've just got a few questions for y'all, and then I'm going to hand it off to the audience to see if you can join us in dialogue and see what questions you might have. How's that sound? Good, awesome. Panelists, if you could just introduce yourself by sharing your pronouns with us, the org or community that you've been working with or representing today, and if you could share what you've done up until this point through your work around mental health for the community. And before I hand it off to you, Greg, to start us off with introductions, I'm asking folks to use their pronouns for a very specific reason. In recent organizing spaces and now even educational spaces, we have been asking folks to lead by identifying themselves through gender. Now, we know that gender is not a binary. It's not just male or female. It sits on the spectrum. So to put it into practice, we hand it off to others to self-identify how we want them to show, how they are showing up in space as it relates to their gender identity. Cool? Greg, kick us off. Who are you?
Hi, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Greg Wilson. I'm currently a senior manager. He or his is my pronouns, and I'm a senior manager at In the Meantime Men's Group, which is based here in Los Angeles. I've been working in public health for about 14 years, and what I've done personally to really kind of tackle the issues that a lot of young people have around mental health is actually share my own story, and I believe that it was important for me to share my story because a lot of people don't realize that we go through the same things that so many others are going through. And if someone don't share their stories or talk about how they overcome certain things, how will they ever be an example for someone else? And so I did that through a book that I wrote called Metamorphosis of a Heart, and it spoke about going through the suicidal stages, talked about going through the stages of depression and going through dealing with my identity, learning about sexuality and trying to find acceptance, dealing with religion. It talks about all the different things that I feel kind of contribute to a lot of the mental health issues that we find a lot of young people going through today. And now in the work that I do, I'm able to provide mentorship and counseling and guidance for young people that are just seeking to be assisted or helped or just loved. And so without me talking too much, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Greg.
Hi, my name is Amber Whittington, also known as Amber's Closet. I'm an activist, mostly through my YouTube channel, my other social media. I do the same. I feel like I try to tap into mental health awareness by sharing my story and sharing things that I've gone through or that I see others go through on my channel. And I try to talk about things that other influencers are scared and nervous to talk about. But with that being said, I feel like I can do a lot more, especially because mental health affects my family directly. So I'm here to learn and be able to just see how I can do more and see how I can talk about it without, I guess, my family getting upset. Yeah, so that's it. I'm a YouTuber.
Bueno, primero que nada, a mí me gusta darle gracias a mi poder superior por darme la oportunidad de estar aquí con ustedes. Y también quiero honrar la tierra en la que estamos hoy en día aquí. I just acknowledge my higher power for giving me the opportunity to share space with all of you today. And I also honor the land where we're standing on today. My name is Bambi Salcedo, and I have the privilege to lead a national advocacy organization that recently started providing social supportive services to transgender and non-conforming individuals here in Los Angeles. And I have been doing this kind of work for about 20 years. It is obviously not easy when you have to continuously fight the systems that continue to oppress us. But I'm very honored and privileged that I get to do that. It's important that I acknowledge my privilege, because as a trans Latina immigrant, mujer or woman, I get to do amazing work, but also I get to have some things that many of us take for granted, that unfortunately many members of the trans community and gender nonconforming community continue to experience. And I think it's important that we acknowledge the social conditions that lead for us to be in a fucked up state, if you will. And those are the things that contribute for us to I guess, experience mental health issues. When we don't have the ability to have a stable housing, for instance, when we continually get discriminated when trying to access basic services such as healthcare services or mental health services, for instance, those are the things that cause trauma for us to navigate this marginalizing world. And what we do and what we have been doing, I have to say that, it's not just work that I do. The work that we do is done through amazing individuals who understand the specific issues of our community. We as a community obviously are what many consider a minute community, but we're a mighty community, if you will, because we are changing things. And I also want to say, going back to this sort of like institutional oppression that we experience as trans people, if we can see how we are positioned within our society through the dictation of the mental health industry, right? Trans people in 2018 continue to be categorized as if we have a mental health issue. Who of you know what the DSM-5 is? Right? So if we look at where trans people are in comparison to the gay and lesbian community, for instance, right? The gay and lesbian community was removed from, or actually homosexuality was removed from the DSM in the 70s. And trans people continue to be there. So, I want to give this broader aspect of how these institutions position us for people in general categorize us as we are crazy.
Switch. Hi, folks. All right, so I'm Teek Milan, pronouns he, him, his. So the work that I do, I started my career as a mentor and as a teacher working with LGBT youth, particularly homeless and marginally housed LGBT youth. And along the way, I found a way to couple that type of advocacy work with doing a lot of media representation. So right now, I travel throughout the country. Really, I travel internationally sharing my story of being a trans man. And I think, it's important for me to be able to do that kind of work, because it's about being a model of possibility. I think oftentimes people think that being queer and being trans and being black are things that are like mutually exclusive, like you can't be all of these three things at the same time. But I'm here to say that we can. And also as someone who is a masculine person, who is more on the binary, I'm really interested in talking about what I call creating organic masculinity. What does it mean for us as trans people and queer people to create new blueprints of the gendered experience, about being self-determined in our gender, about having blueprints for other people around the complexity of our human existence. And I think that this ties into mental health because, representation, whether it be in the media, whether it be in our literature, is us being seen. And I think so often what happens is we become invisible, and that fucks with our minds, when every time we turn on TV or every time we look, we aren't represented. We are treated as if we don't exist, as if we're some big bad boogeyman, you know? And so I'm here to say that we do exist. And also to push back against this idea, like you were saying, like to push back against this idea that there's something wrong with us. Well, it's not us, it's these systems, you know? It's these oppressive systems, it's the unjust laws, it's, you know, it's these warped, hypocritical, you know, thinking around ideology around our religions that tell us that God doesn't love us. It's our families that can't accept us and abuse us. Like these are all of the things that create mental health issues within our communities, you know? So I think it's important for us to understand those things and to love ourselves and love the brilliance of being queer and being trans and keep pushing against the things that breaks our hearts and breaks our minds. So that's the work I do.
Awesome. Yes, let me give a high five down there too. Teak, I've been browsing your Twitter page. Okay. And you shared on your Twitter page that queerness is grounded in self-determination and intention, which you just used that term, self-determination. Yeah. For me, I think that counters the idea of stigma, which we often know is the thing that prevents us from being our most healthy and most productive selves. Yeah. So can you share your journey to getting toward those values of self-determination and intention?
Yeah, you know, it's one thing I always say when I give my talks is that, you know, if you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand, you know? And I think sometimes that's a hard concept for folks, but as queer and trans people, that's exactly what we did, you know? I came into this world the youngest of 4 girls, and I'm leaving a man, a husband, and a father, because that's who I saw here. And no matter how hard that journey was, and the sacrifices that I had to make, and the heartbreak that I had to endure, I became the person that I wanted to be. You know, I became what I call a man of my own design. You know, and I think that's important for us as queer people to get grounded in the fact that there is power there. There is power in saying that I'm willing to sacrifice everything. I'm willing to sacrifice and possibly lose everybody I know that I thought loved me in order for me to be my most authentic self. You know, so I think I want us to start to reframe these conversations around what it means to be queer people, to be LGBT people. You know, I think that there's brilliance there. I think that there's a lot of love there. You know, the most beautiful and inclusive type of love I've ever seen has been in our communities. You know, I came out as a lesbian when I was 14. So like soon as like puberty hit, I was like, girls, you know, as girls, you know, when I was 14, and then I came out as trans again when I was in my 20s. And, you know, throughout my entire life of dating and love, you know, the best love that I saw was in queer community. People loving people exactly as they are, all along the gender spectrum, all different types of body types, people from all different backgrounds, just loving people and celebrating them exactly as they are. And I think there's something beautiful there. And people tell us that there's something wrong with us because we do that. And it's like, there's something wrong with you because you can't, you know? So what does it mean for us to be a model of possibility, not just within our communities, but to other people? And I think particularly in cisgender heterosexual communities and population, there's a limitation on how people can be determined within their gender and how they love and how they express themselves. And for us as queer people, what we're saying is that there isn't. Like, this is who we are, and this is how we're going to show up, you know? And we could be a model of possibility for other people as well. We could be a model of possibility for those cisgender folks and heterosexual people who have hurt us time and time again, who have torn us down time and time again. It's like, I'm thinking about, like, how could we rise above that? And to rise above that is to stay grounded in our self-determination and in our intention, because that's the kind of life that we live. And I think that's really a beautiful and brilliant thing. I think that queer people are the future.
We are. We very much so are. Bambi, Teak also mentioned this idea around visibility and being seen, and I think there's a intercultural conversation around how we position trans folks that hasn't happened until more recently, about how we center and really lead with the trans identity. Can you share how being either invisible or visible really feeds into mental health, particularly around folks who are trans?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a question that is like a sword with 2 blades, so to speak, right? You know, I think, yes, it is true that in the last few years, you know, trans visibility or trans people have been like more at the forefront through media outlets, right? And I can definitely say that I am one of those privileged individuals who have been uplifted and highlighted in that way. But I think with that, so there's a couple of things that happen. One is that many people think that because we are in the media, that there's visibility of trans people in the media, that the social conditions of trans people are fixed, right? Which we're far from that. And then the other thing is that through that visibility that has been created, also it seems like the violence against trans women specifically has also increased. And maybe it has not increased, but I think the violence against trans women specifically has been at the forefront as well. So I think there has been those two things that through visibility, also violence has increased because people feel that we shouldn't have the permission to be who we are. And so that is unfortunate. And the other thing that I want to say is that unfortunately, many of us, or some of us, I should say, who are visible in the media, how that captures some of our lives, it really is not capturing the lives of, I'm going to say common trans people, right? Like they're not really necessarily highlighting and uplifting people's experiences in terms of like homelessness. And even when that happens, there's sort of like this victimization that goes with it. They're not really recognizing the resilience of trans people, right? Because despite the different challenges that we experience within our society, we are survivors and we thrive and we live, our authentic selves, as Stick was saying. And so, there are different ways that we as a community also are pushing back. For instance, our organization, again, we are the very first trans-led organization here in Los Angeles providing critical services for trans and gender nonconforming people. And one of the things that I think is important for us to create visibility is for us to enhance our political incidence. We did the very first Transgender Policy Institute. It was a statewide effort, and right now we have a trans policy organizer and strategist who was organizing trans people across the state to enhance our political incidence, to make sure that policies and structures that continue to marginalize us, we change that and we create visibility through that, and we build trans power to that.
Thank you for that, Bambi. Part of visibility is for us to be able to see ourselves. And Greg, I know you've worked a long time with young people in a number of ways, but literally guiding them through the healthcare system. And I'd be curious for you to share, what are some of the challenges that you have seen, particularly for young people, trying to not only access just general health care, but in particular how challenges in accessing mental health care?
I would more so say the systems are never created, more so the systems are created to benefit a lot of times the organizations. I'm going to just step outside of what the politically correct thing to say is. A lot of times systems are created, but it's not really considering the individuals that need the services. So a lot of times we will try to guide a person into this mental health services, and it takes 2 weeks to get an appointment. This is just an example. It takes 2 weeks to get an appointment. The first appointment will be an intake appointment. So they wait for 2 weeks, go do an intake appointment where they ask for insurance information, fill out all these papers, and after that they say, okay, now we're going to give you another 2 weeks before we can get you to see a doctor. So by the time a young person goes to see the actual therapist or whatnot, it's been past a month or so, and the need is even more intensified, or they just won't come back. Because they're like, this system is way too complicated. If you really care about me, why can't I see somebody now? I need somebody now. And so I think the biggest challenge is trying to explain to a person why these systems that they say are the best systems are not really there to benefit them as much as it is to benefit the agencies. So then we have to find individuals like ourselves that really care, and we overextend ourselves. We make sure that we are there for that person, to even just be a listening ear. And so I think that that's where it begins. I think when it comes down to the systems, I keep saying systems, I hate that word because I keep saying it over and over, but when it comes to the process is broken. The systems are broken. And I believe that it keeps the people broken. And I really know that it took for us to step outside the box and not do what in agencies, what we're funded to do in order for us to really get to the heart of what the rooted issues are. Mental health is real because life experiences are real. The homelessness that we have to see day to day with our young people is real. The fact that, drug use sometimes is the thing that numbs the realities for them. So of course we can't say get off of drugs and get on this program, because the reality is sometimes that is what helps them get through their days when they have to live at the bus station or sleep on the streets. So we have to really cater to the individual and make sure that we're meeting them where they are and really be realistic in what we're expecting of them, and not hold it to what we expect necessarily, but what is best for the individual. And I think that's where it starts. Now, when it comes to me, like I said, just extending a listening ear or just a hug, saying, you know what, I see you. When oftentimes people feel so invisible, I think that alone is just a starting point. Sometimes people just want to be seen, and we don't want people to disappear in the processes or the systems. So I will say that. So with me as a person, I'm the person that I don't care if I work a 12-hour day. I'm like, look, if you need to go to the doctor, I'm taking you to your first 3 appointments. I want to make sure that you go to the appointment. I want to make sure that you can ask the doctor the questions you need to know. And I will ask the questions that you may not know that you need to know, so that way you can understand how to develop the proper relationships with your doctor or your healthcare provider. Because no one's teaching them the process, or no one is showing them how empowered they really can be in these processes or these systems, because all they're told is, here, go in here, go to this appointment, and then that's it. They may have a long thing of questions, and the doctor is so quick trying to get to the next patient that they're pushing them out the door. So they're feeling like, okay, I can't ask. I'm intimidated by this process. I don't even know why and what is happening to me. But I'm supposed to learn how to advocate for myself and ask the questions that I don't even realize I need to ask. So that's why I start making sure I'm there with them. And I'm the person that will hold the doctors accountable. I'm the person that will go do little secret shopping things whenever I'm like, you know what? Let me see what my process would be if I went to this clinic. And then if I see that something's not right, I can then advocate for myself in that situation and say, listen, if I was somebody else, how would they get through this process? If I'm a person that knows how to navigate through this and they are someone that we're bringing through the process, how would you expect them to get through this? So I think really it's about holding people accountable. It's also about us making sure we know when and how to advocate for others when they can't advocate for themselves. And then also empowering other people to realize that, you know what, you really are the reason why, truthfully, these agencies exist. Because without these numbers or whatever else they're going for, they won't be here. So therefore, you get the resources you need, you get the services you need, and you recognize that you are the priority. So that's where I'll start.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I guess just to tag on to that, you talked about, after working a 12-hour day, you'll still be the one to go and show up. And I know Teak talked about mentorship, and I'm sure you all have young people in your lives. How does that affect your own mental health, and how do you kind of sustain who you are as you help others?
For me, at first I used to do too much. Trust me, I used to way too much. I used to try to be Superman without the S on my chest. But what I realize is this: as long as I communicate effectively with each individual and say, listen, this is the process. This is what I'm going to do to try to benefit you or to help you out. And if I walk them through the stages, let them know what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, they'll see that I'm actually putting in my effort. So when it is time for me to go home, I don't feel the same guilt I used to feel. I used to feel guilty when I could not help every single person. I used to feel like, okay, how am I going home and someone is homeless, or we're still waiting for the shelter to call them back? I used to feel guilty about that. But what I do now is, if I'm sitting down with an individual, I say, listen, okay, so these are the action steps. We're going to do these 5 things. You're going to sit here with me. I want you to know that after I call these people, this is who you're going to call. This is the contact person. I let them realize that it is a partnership. Because I'm not here to do it all, because I need you to learn how to advocate for yourself by teaching you the systems, teaching you the process. And so I think it's really about training and teaching, and also letting them know that, look, I'm not just going to say I'm going to do something and not do it. I'm going to show you how I'm doing it and show you the processes, so that way it is a little bit more understood. And so I think for my own mental health, that stopped me from feeling the guilt. Secondly, of course, I go to therapy once a week, just to make sure I get it all decompressed, because the reality is, how can I help someone else if I'm not helping myself? And then thirdly, I make sure I tap into what I love, and that's art. So when it comes to when I'm helping other people as well, I utilize art. I keep journals in my car. If I see a young person that just looks down, I'll sit down and talk to them, and before I leave, I'll say, here, listen, here's a journal. Just write down what you feel. If you don't have anyone to talk to, just write it down. And even if you don't want no one to find it, you could burn it up after you're done. Write it down. Get it off your chest. Because the more they say, the lack of expression is depression. So for that reason, what we do is we make sure that they get that off. Because if they don't, it's going to burden them, it's going to weigh them down, and then we'll find that that's where the mental health even gets intensified because there's no outlet. So for me, that's what I do. I write. I do my own therapy. I go to the beach at least 3 times a week. and I just realized the importance of making sure I check in with myself. I do self-assessments as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Really, really appreciate that. And I'm glad you talked about the art. Yes, give Greg a round of applause. I appreciate that. I'm glad you talked about the use of art through writing, which I'd like to now hand over to Amber, who is a content creator, creating content, creating culture every day. Can you share about your own experience, but also what do you feel like the responsibility is to creators, content creators, cultural makers, about uplifting the stories of the LGBT community so that we can be visible, but also stories around mental health and our mental health awareness?
Well, first I want to start. It's she, her. Sorry, I did not say that in the beginning.
We forgive you.
Thank you. Well, first, I started my YouTube channel because I felt like it took me way too long to get to the point where I was confident in who I am, and to the point where I was able to express it online. I told the world my coming out story before I told a lot of my family members, and it was really just like this burst I had inside of me. It's like, I cannot believe I let all these different factors in my life hold me back from who I am. So once I started creating videos and I started to express it little by little, I realized that my audience started building really because they were able to relate to that. So then as I started going on, I felt a sense of responsibility to keep that up and keep going and empowering everyone that watches me and supports me, and let them know that they have a voice, as well as them supporting my platform and creating a voice for myself. So as I started growing, I felt more and more responsibility to do that. And so there's not that many influencers that are able to that want to speak up about things that are affecting, society, or things that may be affecting themselves. Like, they don't like to get personal. They might not like to share their own stories, but I feel like it's very important to do that. So, so it's really important to me to do everything that I can to share my voice and share my opinion and let others know that it's okay for them to do so. And then what I've noticed is I feel like mental health comes with a lot of the struggles that youth or anybody may have with what's going on inside of them. So a lot of the people that support me, that are my subscribers, may live in an area or have a surrounding or community that doesn't support who they are, because inside that they might have these feelings of, hey, I might be gay. And then they feel like something's wrong with them because of those surroundings, and because people aren't there to support them, or they don't have anything to go to in their community where they can get that out. And so I feel like keeping that in, and also having people around them that are constantly putting them down or telling them something's wrong with them, is where some of the mental, that's where that can surface, or that's where that can really start. And so that's another reason why I like to share, stop giving a care, about what other people think, and just be yourself, and don't be afraid to be yourself. And then being that outlet for them to go to and say, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Look in Amber's closet. She can do it, so I'm just blessed to be one of those people that someone can go to, and I can be that outlet for that person.
Absolutely. And I hope there's more content created, particularly for the LGBTQ community, to get access to mental health awareness. I want to invite the audience into the conversation, so we could get some microphones out in the house. I know you all have been immersed in a world full of art, that's hopefully moving to shift your own thinking around how you interact with the LGBTQ community, but also how you uplift the need for mental health awareness and healthcare. I see a microphone there, and I see a hand there. Do you want to pass that over? You might need to stand up so they can see you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mateo, he, him, his.
Thank you for that,
The first time
Mateo.
I've said that. Thank you. I just wanted to address some of the comments. I'm sorry, I didn't remember your name at the end.
Teak.
Teak. You were talking about the future is queer, which is great, because I'm gay. But I want to talk about, or have you talk about, the racism and the judgment that's still going on within the gay community. Because I know you said, oh, we're loving each other and, you know, different sizes and all that. But I think that in reality also there's still that judgment and that racism and that agenda, you know, that's driven by white males. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've definitely given that a lot of thought. And I think the reason that we are having conversations that are intersectional is because of the work that Black and brown LGBTQ people are doing. Like, we have been at the forefront of making sure that we have a seat at the table, that we have a voice, that these organizations, these LGBT organizations that for so long were just focused on gay white men getting married, that they are finally starting to look at what's happening, you know, to people of color within our community. And also, you know, for me, you know, growing up, I really was a part of this Black LGBT community. I'm just going to keep it 100. Like, it really was a lot of white folks around me, and it still really isn't, you know? And I think it's important for us within POC community to start talking about, like, anti-Blackness within queer culture and queer community, what that looks like and how we start to perpetuate these ideas amongst ourselves, you know? It's something that we don't talk about enough, but we are having these conversations. We are having these conversations within community and to our white allies, and I think little by little we are seeing change happen, you know? So there's anti-Blackness that has to be talked about, there's colorism that has to be talked about, and this idea of like recreating these systems of binary thinking and binary gender that happens. You know, I can't tell you how many times I could walk into a room and somebody is more willing to listen to me, you know, walk in a room with queer people, and folks are more willing to listen to me as a binary queer trans man, as opposed to creating space for people who are gender nonconforming, for people whose pronouns are they. Like, what does that look like for us to really start to understand that there is fluidity within our gender identity, our performance, and our presentation? So I think that there's a lot of work to be done. But if anybody's going to do the work, you know, we are. And again, I've seen so many Black and brown folks who are really at the forefront of this movement. Bambi has been doing this work for so many years. There's so many people in New York City who have been a part of this grassroots or organizing that has started to pepper into like the more dominant culture of LGBT activism and advocacy circles. So I think that we're doing the work. There's still more work to be done, but the reason that we are having these intersectional conversations and the reason why these things are coming up is because of all of us, you know, working so hard to make sure that we are seen within our community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I also want to add to your question and have Greg come back in. I'm glad you brought up race, because race is a very challenging issue for some, really easy, I think, for us. But you talked about the navigation system, and I know you work with a lot of young people of color. On the other side, they're not folks of color that they're interacting with. Can you talk just a little about, and you've shared this before in just our one-on-one conversations, how does cultural competency play into people navigating the system in order to access the things that they need? Wow.
So that's a layered, because I've seen so many different experiences that honestly bothered me. And that's around cultural competency, that's around, in some situations, sexual orientation, like the fact that a lot of times we have doctors that are well-versed in understanding how to cater to individuals, but then the line staff or the people at the check-in counter are really insensitive, and if a person's HIV positive, they get judged, or they feel something around that, or if the person finds out they're trans or gay or whatever the case might be, they get a different level of judgment that comes about. So I think that there's so many layers to it, and also I think that the lack of being able to really understand and articulate what we really go through sometimes as people of color, I think that becomes something that people would like to believe you can read in a textbook and understand, but it's not that. You know, there is more layers to it. So I would say in what I've been encountering, most times it gets passed off as if, okay, you could deal with it. Or, you know, there's resources for you, go ahead and access it, not realizing that it's a little bit different accessing some of the resources that weren't really designed, I would say, honestly, for us funding-wise. So if we go to a place like somewhere where I used to work, like the LA LGBT Center as an example, which I love because they have numerous resources. I think sometimes when a young black boy or gay man goes in there that I'm trying to link it to services, a lot of times he doesn't feel as if he's really taken seriously or feeling understood or feeling as if he's valued. And I've seen that happen so many times to where he says, I just want to go somewhere else. I want to go somewhere where I don't feel as if I'm being looked at as a lab rat. I want to go somewhere where I don't feel as if, I'm being judged because of my race. And so when you take them other places, then it just is a lot of that. I don't know I'm talking in circles, but it's a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing race into the conversation. I really appreciate that. Say that again. Oh, Bambi or Amber, y'all have something to add in relation to race?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Only if you want to. Don't feel obligated.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think when we bring the issue of race, many people get uncomfortable. And those who get most uncomfortable are the ones who are actually perpetrating the oppression, exactly. Right? And so I think when we are able to open our minds and our hearts and to be able to be true to who we are and what we do in the world, then we are going to be able to create the change that needs to happen. And as Stick was saying, we are the ones who are calling shit out, right? Because a lot of times people don't even know. I mean, because, some people are so privileged that they don't even acknowledge, sometimes what they do unintentionally, right? And that has been because of how we have been programmed to act and to react towards other people. And this goes along with, with trans people and gender nonconforming people within our society. Again, how we are positioned, trans people within our society, it's pretty fucked up, and when obviously, color and ethnicities gets into place, also, it broadens the issues. So I think what I would just say, it is important that we open our minds and our hearts to create the change that we want to see.
So, and I just want to just piggyback on that. There's so many people of color who are doing this work of bringing like this intersectional experience to the queer community. But we are not the ones that created like this anti-blackness and this racism in queer community. So there has to be a way in which we can take a step back from doing all of this emotional and physical labor of like dragging our white allies to the point of understanding our experience as queer people of color and say, get your shit together and you start doing this work, because it's you folks who are holding up these ideas, and it's you who are benefited from these ideas, not from us. And I think that's the next step in the conversation. I think that we're seeing it a little bit. We have large organizations like GLAAD or HRC or, Lambda Legal who would not really check in for black people and for people of color, particularly like queer and trans people of color, until we started kicking and screaming and really making a fuss about it. So now we're seeing them, in small steps starting to utilize their privilege to be in solidarity for us. But we have to keep holding people's feet to the fire. We have to keep telling our white allies, you have to be accountable, you have to step up, and you have to get this shit right, because we didn't create it.
Right. Absolutely.
I would like to piggyback off of what Teak just said, especially when it comes to race. I know that a lot of my followers, it's probably maybe 20% African American, but I speak a lot on things that affect African Americans and especially myself. But I found myself getting in a lot of rooms where, that's kind of, I don't know, I found myself comfortable in uncomfortable spaces. And then because of that, I am able to change people's minds and change their stereotypes they might have. And then with being able to do that, let them know about some issues that they just kind of sweep under the rug, which have to do with, racism and African American culture or Mexican Americans, anything like that. So I try to add it into my content as much as possible to get people, like the rest of my 80%, to pay attention to these things. And I try to make it easy for them to digest by not throwing it in their face, but maybe doing it in a way where it's entertaining a little bit so that they don't feel attacked. And then that's my way of being able to change some people's stereotypes or the negative stigmas around that, because I do feel like in the LGBT community, we're broken down into like little segments when we're already a minority as it is. And so I see that a lot with different events that I go to. And sometimes it bothers me. And so I want to be able to kind of bridge the gap between that and say, hey, we're all human beings and we can all be in the same space.
Thank you. You got something else, Greg?
I just wanted to share one more thing. First off, y'all inspire me so much. I feel like I'm about to cry up here. No, but I wanted to share something in regards to racism as well, because the thing that when we think about mental health, it's so interesting that I primarily, just so you all know, I primarily cater to young gay black men. It's been my experience, because I'm a young gay black, well, I think I'm still young, but I'm a gay black man. But what I primarily do is focus on what I know. And so what I wanted to speak to around racism is the fact that a lot of times young gay black men come back to me and they feel guilt because of their experiences around racism. So like if they're getting harassed by police, or if they're getting kicked out of stores or restaurants because people assume that they can't buy a meal or whatever the case might be, those things alone, they'll come back and they'll kind of just keep it in because they don't want to feel embarrassed by it, which they did in the experience, or they don't want to speak about it and feel like they're complaining or whatnot. But the reality is this happening so often and so many times, and I think that adds to what they start to conceptualize about themselves mentally, because that is what they believe they deserve, or that's what they believe they have to encounter, or that is what they believe is the norm, and that has to shift and change. And so when it comes to the point where we say, no, this is not what is supposed to happen, and then they feel disempowered to even fight back or stand up for themselves. I think when you encounter racism so often and so much in your life, it becomes what you expect. And I think we have to break that barrier, because why should we expect to be mistreated? Why should we expect to have people judge? Or why should we expect these things? So I really believe that is a big part of where mental health limitations start, or complications start, and all that kind of stuff, because we don't, like mentioned, we don't address it because it is the tough, rough conversation. But as Ayanna would say, those are the conversations we need to have. We need to have those hard conversations. And when we have those hard conversations, we find the real results and resolutions. And I think that is a big issue. And we always try to sweep it under the rug because it's uncomfortable. But if it's hitting us all in the face so many times, you only turn your cheek so many times before you say, let me slap you back.
Right.
Kudos to Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined that term intersectionality, which, we're having a conversation around sexuality and around gender, but she basically said you can't talk about sexuality and gender without talking about race. So thank you for bringing in race into the conversation. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Jillian. Pronouns are she and her. And to continue the conversation about intersectionality, oftentimes when audiences demand diversity, content creators are told, well, why don't you just produce it yourself? And I was wondering your opinion on, should these huge studios or networks, how much, and if they should at all, take responsibility in bettering representation and diversity in mainstream media? Because we are getting like little inklings of that diversity and representation, but that doesn't mean it's good. So I just wanted to know, the LGBT community, of course, they're going to take responsibility to promote diversity and representation, but should they all take that responsibility? If we are, trying to become a more progressive society, shouldn't these larger organizations take part in it if they're really serious about it?
Do you want to direct that to anyone in particular?
Oh, no, this is a question open to anyone.
Here.
Yes is the answer. They need to take responsibility. Yes. I want to start with saying that I believe that YouTube got so big because of the fact that people were able to go there and see what they weren't seeing on TV. And then TV's, like the cable network, started freaking out and were like, oh, well, dang, they're taking all of our views away. And so I feel like from that point, they started to figure out, all right, so why are we lacking and why are they doing so well? And then with seeing that, okay, it's because individuality and people not being afraid to be themselves and people being their authentic self are shining here, then maybe we should take notes from that. And so I feel like they've started to try, but they started to try with their own team. And then they realize they aren't those people. They're not real. That's not their life. And then so they're trying to give us their version, which is an unauthentic version of our lives. And so I'm starting to see a change and shift in that now. So I'm hoping that they're taking responsibility. Pose just came out on FX. I'm really excited about that. And then Lena Waithe is one person that you see like in every room. You know, like in every board that used to just be straight white male, you see her in every room knocking down doors like, you guys aren't doing this right, so I'm here to let you know that. So I'm hoping and I'm confident in seeing that change get even better. But yes, they are held responsible for that.
You want to say something?
Tiki, you want to add?
Yeah.
Or Bambi?
No, I'm good.
Oh, I think part of the problem with that is accessibility, right? Like many of us don't have access to people who are powerful, right? And who can actually make the changes that need to happen. And part of the issue also is that the industry don't necessarily value the contributions of people of color and trans and queer people of color, right? And so, you know, I think those things need to happen because, again, you know, they are maybe getting there a little bit, but I mean, not nearly enough. There actually needs to be an intentional investment in the talent and the contributions of trans and queer people of color.
And the only thing I would add, too, is making sure that it's realistic imaging, because not everybody got a six-pack. I know I don't. But, I mean, most times they look for the Model S people, but if we show our society in normal forms of all facets, sizes, shapes, and all that kind of stuff, I think that also will help the relatability.
And we've got spaces like this. Like, if we all believe that art and culture is really going to transform the way the world thinks about our identities and thinks about all the issues, those who are creating art and culture have to show up with an analysis around race. They have to show up with analysis around gender, sexuality, so on and so forth. So, yes, they need to do it, but it can't be on the surface. It's got to be some deep, deep learning to really transform how we create work so that as it goes out to the masses, the society shifts their hearts and minds around issues, too.
But until they do that, it's important for all of us to keep creating our own content and using whatever platform that we can to put it out. So it's got to keep going and going.
But at the same time, also hold people accountable for the bullshit that they put out there.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Go for it, Teek. I know you've been holding it.
But you know, I'm just echoing what everybody else is saying. I think it's important. Absolutely, these studios have an obligation. What we have to understand is that, you know, we're not just documenting culture, we're creating culture, right? And even though we may be living in like these white men's systems, this is not their culture, right? This culture is black, this culture is brown, it's queer, it's inclusive. And if these studios want to be on the right side of the future, it would behoove them to make sure that they are inclusive from the top down, making sure that the people that they are employing are telling a diversity of experiences, because that's what humanity is. It doesn't look like it used to anymore. Like that's just the right thing to do. You know, and if you can't appeal to people's, you know, sometimes you can't appeal to people's moral compasses because they already sold it, right? So if you can't appeal to their moral compass, at least appeal to their bottom lines and let them know that companies who are diverse, when they are diverse from the top down, they do better. When you have diversity in revenue and innovation, you have more revenue, you create more, you make more money. You know, this, you know, so it benefits everybody. So they absolutely have an obligation. People who have privileges to have platforms, to tell stories, to create content, to move this culture, have an obligation to make sure that we are all included and to make sure that people's stories are told justly and in an authentic way.
Down.
Yes, drop the mic. Okay, so we could talk all evening, but I just have one last question I'd like to pass off to the panelists before we wrap up. And Greg, you already brought it into the space. We throw out this term all the time, self-care. It's thrown out all the time. Can each of you share 2 ways that you can offer the folks in the audience and the folks online today a method of self-care that they can use and apply in their everyday lives? Can I start down there with you, T? Can we work our way back this way?
Sure. So real quick, I think self-care, being able to say no. Saying no is power. Don't let anybody take away your no. Be able to say, no, I'm not doing this. No, I'm not showing up. No, I can't do this work. No, I'm chilling. I'm watching Netflix. I'm chilling. Right? Be able to say no. And also being able just to stop. Have really clear boundaries and being able just to take a step away. I'm a very introverted person. So when it's time for me to just take care of myself, I just don't want to be bothered. And that has to be okay and not feel guilty about it. Sometimes it's okay to just cocoon away in your own little space and take care of yourself.
Yes. Oh, and how can we find you, Teek?
Oh, you can find me. My website is teekmilan.com, and you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at the Mr. Milan. That's THEMR Milan, MILAN. Check me out.
Awesome. Thank you. Bambi, self-care.
Well, there's a couple of things that I practice that I always encourage people to do. One is that in the morning, so I sleep with a bottle of water next to me, and in the morning, right before I do anything, as soon as I open my eyes, I drink the water and meditate, and as the water is entering my body, it's cleansing all the bullshit and all the fucked up shit that has entered into my body, like thoughts, everything, right? So that's one of the things that I do. But I also get massages once a week. And I also, I'm learning indigenous traditional medicine. So I'm sort of going back to my roots. I believe in spirituality. So I have a spiritual guide that walks me through processes and things like that. And one of the things that I'm also practicing is I'm hugging people heart to heart. And be intentional about that. So those are things that make me connect through people's humanities. And that's also part of my self-care. Really, just being authentic and, loving people for who they are, regardless if the person is homeless or regardless if the person is, having issues with drugs or whatever the case may be, just seeing people eye to eye.
Thank you, Bambi. And how can we find you and the folks over at Trans-Latina Coalition? You can find us on our website. Check out, what we do, who we are, translatina-coalition.org. My personal social media, at LABAMBY, at LaBambi, or Twitter, at TransLatinBambi, or Facebook, Bambi Salcedo. Gracias. Awesome. Cool. Amber, self-care.
So there's two things I do. One, I always say this on my YouTube videos. I think it's really important to do like a small meditation like once or twice a day. And so I always tell people, if you ever look at the clock and realize that you like notice a specific time, you're always looking at the clock. A lot of people say 11:11 to me, but for instance, mine's 9:17, which happens to be my birthday. So at 9:17 in the morning and 9:17 p.m., I look at the clock and realize that's the time. And I take that time to say a few things that I'm appreciative of. And then I try to set a couple small goals for myself that I will fulfill before the next time I do that again. And I feel like that helps me get a sense of fulfillment that I am doing something, I'm accomplishing something. So I'm always saying like self-motivated, as well as it gives me time to kind of like take myself back from like the million things that I do every day, because my work is all day, every day. Like I never stop just being me, right? So then it's like ongoing. So I take a step back and kind of rejuvenate myself. So I think it's really important to do that. And then also just to be appreciative of all the small things in life. Like I am just breathing right now and it's amazing to be here. So there's a roof over my head. And sometimes we like get lost in other things and like we want other things, but we don't take that moment to really just appreciate the small things in life. And the other thing is that because my mind is always going so much and I'm always like on all the news outlets and things that are happening just make me feel so frustrated that I can't get out there and really change things and like make a new president for us, that there's things that just need to happen that I can't do and it's frustrating. So the way that I stop myself from just doing too much is I talk to other people that are in the same lane as me or that I look up to or mentors, and I just like almost use them as a therapy, like you said that you do, and that's probably something I need to do. And I kind of bounce ideas back and forth from them, and it helps me know that, you know, there's nothing wrong with me for having these thoughts all the time and wanting to do more, but there's a way to strategize that energy, you know what I'm saying, and calm down and, and be, you know, I don't know, like more, not, you know, don't do anything erratic, you know, just like, let's do this energy and use it for something positive.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm actually the same. How can folks find you and support you?
Oh, I'm Amber's Closet on YouTube, Amber's Closet on Instagram, and then Amber's Closet 33 on Twitter.
Awesome. And Greg, I know you already shared, but is there any other way you do or find self-care?
Absolutely. I would say for each individual personally, I couldn't just pick two. It's three. Is that okay?
Go for it.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with having more than one.
I'm telling you, and I do this every day, so I need y'all to know. So I will say that the way I begin my day and end my day, I make sure I set the tone for. So I do not just pick my phone up as soon as I wake up. You have to start by just kind of allowing yourself to become one with yourself when you first wake up, because if you start checking your phone, you get on Instagram or whatnot, or you start checking emails, I promise you, you're going to find yourself anxious or all that stuff because of all the day is ready to consume you. So let yourself start your day, and when you end your day, you got to really say, okay, I'm putting the phone down, let me meditate, let me just decompress my day off of me so I can get some good rest. I think that's one thing. Second thing is throughout my day, especially at work, I act like I'm TiVo, right? So I push pause. If ever I feel like I'm getting too overwhelmed, I push pause. I can come back to the TV show in a minute. But it's imperative that you do that, because the reality is sometimes, you know, people keep throwing stuff at you. You feel overwhelmed. You start getting, you're getting worked up. Push pause, take a breather, and then get to it. So you can approach it with a clear mind and a clear, you know, perspective. And the last thing, because I couldn't just pick two, the last thing is making sure that I do an hour of power. So I make sure that as hard as the days get, as busy as the days get, 1 hour of power empowering myself. So that one day I turn off the phone. I don't allow nobody to feel that they can access me. I just do what I want to do for an hour. No interruptions, nothing. If I want to sit in the house and look at the wall, it's my hour to do it. You know what I mean? But I think that's important, because if you do not spoil yourself or do something for you, then you're going to always feel as if you're just giving and never refilling. So those are my things I would say.
Thank you for offering that. And how can people find you and support your work or the work of the orgs you work with?
Okay, so I'm going to try to be quick because I talk a lot, as y'all can tell. So, well, first I'm going to say this. I know this is not what you asked me, but first I'm going to say this. Before you all leave today, if you have an opportunity to come up to me and see me and just say hello, I actually brought wristbands that are in my bag, and they say... Oh, no. Okay, they say not me, not now. Because the thing is, with the agency I work for, in the Meantime Men's Group, we actually have a hashtag called Not Me, Not Now, and it's really giving us all the power to stand up and fight back against oppression. We all have been oppressed in some ways in our life, and I recognize that that's where a lot of the mental health concerns come up too, for ourselves. So I'm going to give you all a wristband. This is going to remind you, not me, not now. So whenever something tries to throw some type of oppressive something at you, you can say, not me, not now. I'm not willing to do that. I'm fighting back against that. I'm not accepting it for myself. And so that's one thing. So you will get a wristband if you just come say hello, because I got it in my bag. And then, but then besides that, if you give an opportunity, I have a book called Metamorphosis of a Heart. And it speaks about the fact that a lot of times in our lives, you know, our heart is where we feel, where we love. And the metamorphosis, the changes that we go through in our lives, a lot of times get us confused about recognizing that we're on the right path. Sometimes we might think that our life is over, but we don't realize that our life is really beginning. Think about the caterpillar and the butterfly, right? So my book talks about that and speaks about dealing with all those things. So you can find me by going on Amazon.com and picking up the book, Metamorphosis of a Heart, on there. And on social media, you can find me on Facebook, Greg Wilson. I can't remember. I've changed my picture like every 3 days. So I don't know which picture is on there now. But you could just find me on there. On Twitter is Aquajaye, which is ACQUAJAYE. It's also that on Instagram. And or you can email me, GDUBBGdubWilson at gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Thank you for spending some time with us today. You've heard at least 4 examples of how to take care of yourself through self-care. Before you leave, share your self-care practice with someone, and thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Can we give a big thank you to Nigel Porter, our incredible moderator, and to this incredible panel who has given us a gift this afternoon.